and welcome to the Buckets and Tea NBA show. I'm your host, Cathryn Naiker. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. Today, joining me is the host of Basketball Feelings, the writer of the Basketball Feelings newsletter, the Instagram page, Basketball Feelings, which you should definitely check out if you haven't, and so many other things. It's Katie Heindl. How you doing?
I'm good. I feel like that's the most concise way, to do an intro instead of listing all the places.
Basketball Feelings,
your one-stop shop.
Yeah. I absolutely love Basketball Feelings. I feel like your Instagram is so funny to me. Like, I'm always so thrilled whenever you post something there. But let's get into it. Starting off with Steph Curry last night is now injured. He has a sprained foot ligament and is listed as out indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
This was against the Boston Celtics. There was a play where him and Marcus Smart were both diving for the ball, and Steve Kerr came out and said it was a dirty play. I don't think anyone agrees with Steve Kerr on this outside of like the Warriors Homer fan canon. I don't know if you got a chance to see the play, what your thoughts are on that, Katie.
I feel like Marcus Smart gets pegged a lot. He's like a player I really love, and I think you really love him until he plays against the team that you're rooting for. And then it becomes like you become a Steve Kerr like situation where you're like, it's a dirty play. But no, I think it looked like they just got tangled up. That kind of stuff, unfortunately, happens.
Yeah, it reminded me of like when we were facing Boston in the playoffs and Marcus Smart had that very iconic flop where like his hands went up in the air and he was like, oh, like he looked like he was auditioning for like Dancing with the Stars. Yeah. And we were all like, how dare you flop? Meanwhile, we have Kyle Lowry, who also flops all the time. He's just not like putting as much like, I don't know I almost use the word grace, but I think there's another word for it. Just like theatrics, maybe, into his flopping. Yes. Yeah. Like, I feel like Kyle maybe does a better job selling the flops.
I think so.
But we were all like outraged. Like, how dare you? So I feel like it's something like that. And also like the timing for Steph Curry to be injured is obviously really bad as we're nearing the playoffs here. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have as much to say about that exactly, but I think, as far as playoff implications go, I think it's a really big deal. I think, I mean, of course, they're in third and they're only one game back from the Grizzlies, who are in second currently. So, where they land in the standings, it is what it is. But if you're not going to have Steph Curry in the first round, if the playoffs started today, it would be a 3-6 matchup, which would be against the Nuggets. That would be a really tough out for the Warriors.
Yeah, it would be tough. And I think just given the season that they've had, and like kind of even how it started when it's like no one really expected them to kind of get off to such a strong start with Clay still out, and them kind of being under, I guess, like definitely under strength. The Nuggets matchup, if that's what it ends up being, that honestly seems like a kryptonite kind of style matchup for them without Steph, unfortunately. I guess like the silver lining is that Clay, like I think Clay will be in good shape, like good competitive shape by then, you know what I mean? Jordan Poole has been playing super well. Draymond obviously is Draymond Green. So like they are physical enough. But I think if you lose Steph's shooting, who kind of steps up to fill that spot? It's tough. It's like the worst time of the season, to have an injury like this happen. But I think about the Cavs, like in Jared Allen, and I like some like this does seem to be unfortunately happening. Because I think not everybody's 100% right now. I don't know. It kind of sucks because right now I think what the Warriors have against them is they are in this a bit of like a ticking I don't want to say a time bomb because I don't want to imply they're going to explode, but like they are kind of nearing. There is an awareness that there perhaps wasn't last season, the season before. I think of like the longevity of Steph Curry's career, Draymond, Clay, like all those guys, especially together. You know what I mean? And kind of this idea of like, what's the next iteration of the Warriors? You know, what does that team look like? I don't think the Warriors have quite figured it out yet. So that sucks because I think that awareness is kind of hanging over the team. But also
Mhm.
like the Warriors have pulled out wins with like, you know what I mean? Like with much worse odds stacked against them. So I think it sucks. It's like really, really bad timing, but I wouldn't ever count them out.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. Like at the beginning of the season, I was like, oh my God, we could be watching one of the greatest sports comebacks
Mm-hmm.
of all time because they looked so good even before Klay Thompson came back.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Draymond injury happened and it was like, wow, this team, although they're still very good, looks really rough without him. And
Mm-hmm.
then they finally got Draymond back and then now Steph's out. So, I mean, it's just, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, this era for them is not going to last long. I think they've done an incredible job continuing to build depth around these three.
Mm-hmm.
They are a really deep team, and you know, there is a world where like they could get out of the first round without Steph. Absolutely. But in terms of like winning a championship, I don't see them going that far. But also he's been listed out indefinitely. So we really don't know how long
Mm-hmm.
he's out. And I was gonna say something shady, just something like about how we know they're gonna rush him back. But anyway.
I don't know. But like the Warriors are kind of like the Raptors. They keep all that stuff pretty close, right? Like with
Yes.
yeah, with like injury and like predicted like kind of timeline and stuff like that, especially with Steph. I don't know that they would rush him. He might want to rush back.
Mm.
Um, but again, I would say like Steph, and again, I am not trying to diminish like the injury. I'm not an expert in that kind of thing. But Steph doesn't play such a physical game, you know what I mean? That like
Mm-hmm.
would really require him to like be up close or kind of in the thick of things. So maybe he can come back on like a minutes restriction kind of thing if they're desperate. Remains to be seen how desperate the Warriors become.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's very well said. I think they'll, you know, for them, I think it'll just be about floor spacing. Like, will
Yeah.
they still be able to space the floor? And will someone emerge to be enough of a shooting threat that they'll feel the need to double team somebody?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what it's going to really come down to, but we'll have to wait and see. Another thing I wanted to talk about is there's been a ton of really high, like 50 plus point scoring nights over the last 2 weeks by various players. I have a list here that I'll just go through really quick. So on March 5th, LeBron James scored 56 points against the Warriors. On that was March 5th. On March 6th, Jason Tatum scored 54 points against the Nets. March 8th, Kyrie Irving 50 points versus the Hornets. LeBron again, March 11th, 50 points versus the Wizards. March 13th, Kevin Durant 53 points versus the Knicks. March 14th, Karl Anthony Towns 60 points versus the Spurs. And March 15th, Kyrie Irving 60 points versus the Magic. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, is this a trend?
I mean, some of those like look at the matchups, and I think that like that's maybe explanation enough. No shade against the Magic, but you know, I don't know what you're gonna really who do they have to kind of throw out against that Nets team?
Well, I think like one of the crazy things is that I feel like the reason why we're not seeing like an 80 point, you know, 81 Kobe style game is because like none of these teams are really still in it
Mm-hmm.
at the
Yeah.
end to justify the player to keep playing. Like I think that's a part of it where it's just like, oh, this is just a blowout now. Let's
Yeah,
pull you out
exactly.
early in the fourth. You have
Yeah.
50 points, you have 60 points. And the other thing I'm like is like, oh, like these teams aren't exactly like the top teams in the league. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they're all
Mhm.
kind of hovering in that play in, right? Like the Lakers, the Nets, the Timberwolves, they're all in that little clump, which is also really interesting to me because I don't know if they're just like I think LeBron's going for the scoring title. I think multiple
Yeah.
people have said that at this
Yes.
point. You know, maybe the Nets are trying to fight to get out of the play-in. I think that might be, if you're a Nets fan, that's what you're looking at right now. And maybe even with the Timberwolves still as well. But it's funny to me that's like, wow, all these impressive performances by individuals on what are otherwise mediocre teams.
I mean,
for whatever reason, except for the Celtics, because the Celtics
Yeah.
have really found themselves and they're currently 4th in the East. So that would be the
Yeah.
only exception.
And a few like stuttery kind of start-stop situations, I think, for the Nets.
Yes,
but
of course. Yeah.
and like maybe that's just a case of like Kyrie's like feeling pretty pent up and trying to go off where he can play on the road. Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's a part of me is like, oh, it's just like this kind of, it is this weird time of year. Like you mentioned, I definitely think like a lot of those teams hovering around the play-in has something to do with it, you know, and this like kind of, whether you want to call it a desperation push or just kind of like a last gasp sort of like to make it, like to climb up the standings or to like get out of play-in contention. That definitely has something to do with it. But I feel like this stretch is always when like the weirdest things like that happen. You know, like someone will just go off for like, 56 like points for no reason on like a Tuesday night. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But that actually, maybe that's also like very unique to LeBron, who I think still has it in him to just like get extremely angry that his team is just like doing so poorly, you know what I mean? And yes, I think the scoring record, that's also a pretty apt observation. But I don't know. It's like you can't be like it's a trend, because it is still one of these things where it's like that's still crazy that all of that happened. Like it's such a feat, right? Like just for like feats to kind of happen night after night. The worst part is when we're like, oh yeah, like another like, you know, like
I'm already complacent.
Yeah. I'm used to this.
Like Kyrie, you only scored 25 points.
Yeah.
Not impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just the whole play-in, I think, has a lot to do with this. And I think we're going to talk about LeBron's pent-up anger a little bit later when we talk about the Raptors. But yeah, I mean, I do think it is quite a feat. It is impressive. I mean, and I only read like the 50+ point performances. Like I think Trae Young went off for 40 something the other night, and
yeah, there's
like
that whole other tier, right?
Yeah, there's that whole other tier of 40 to 50 points.
Mediocre. Yeah, just mediocre.
They didn't make the list, and that list is on NBA.com, so they didn't make the NBA.com list.
What a burn.
Yeah, that's not even like my original list. But yeah, it is interesting. And also like something I noticed, and it has nothing to do with this, but tonight, you know, Thursday, we're recording this on a Thursday. Thursday night, usually big night in NBA basketball. The Pistons and the Orlando Magic are the only game tonight.
I kind of love that.
Because everyone's like, NCAA, March Madness, more important. Like everybody's like weirdly tired this time of year, but also there's so much at stake.
I know. I mean, that could still be one of the most exciting games of the season. I feel like the conditions are right for it. You know, like who's going off for 50 points tonight?
Yeah,
Cade? Maybe Cade? Terrence Ross? We'll see.
Oh, Terrence Ross is capable. We know that.
Yeah.
We all know Terrence Ross is capable if they give him the minutes. Yeah, who knows? I mean, honestly, watch me just like be watching a movie, something completely unbasketball related. Just give myself one night off, and then suddenly I'll see on Twitter like, oh man, Terrence Ross, 55 points. What?
60 points, maybe. Yeah, probably. That's how it always goes, especially with those games, you know? And I think that that probably fuels those games. Because that must be so annoying to those guys. They're like, nobody's watching this, you know? Like, they get mad. They get LeBron style mad.
I mean, like, and both those teams are not in the playoff picture.
Yeah.
So there's just like, I mean, I'm trying to think back to like old Raptor days when like we were not in the playoff picture. Like they would try to sell us on like personal growth and like setting, you know, making a statement for next season and, you know, storylines like that you buy
like
into.
to get people at games. But I feel like that also worked better when like the Sprite Zone still existed.
Oh yeah.
Because now you're like, this won't happen to the. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, for the Raptors, like they are in a playoff position, I feel like, and they will be. But who wants to spend like $200 to watch like one of the last 3 games of the season with 0 stakes?
Yeah, I mean that is really the downside to winning. If there is a downside, is you losing the Sprite Zone.
Yeah. R.I.P. Sprite Zone.
R.I.P. Sprite Zone. Never forget. Never forget. We really went on a tangent there, but I absolutely love it. Okay, the other NBA thing I wanted to talk about is this MVP race. I feel like a lot of the other categories this year seem kind of, I don't want to say locked, but they feel a little locked. Like coach of the year, most improved, 6-man. You know, there's clear favorites in those categories. But the MVP race this year, we have this nice Jokic versus Embiid battle. And they played against each other on Monday night. I don't know if you got the chance to see that game or not. It was quite exciting for 2 teams I'm not personally invested in. But in this MVP battle, who's your pick?
One thing I will say though first is like it's funny that because it doesn't seem locked into me, but it also doesn't, it seems locked into certain people, because I've also seen like a lot of stories or tweets or kind of like rhetoric to be like, it's always been Jokic, or like not even like Jokic or Embiid. Some people being like before he got hurt, but being like, it's Steph, or like, you know, it's going to be like, everyone is so sure of the person that they're picking. It's like, this is a clear candidate for MVP. It's like, well, I guess everybody is, which isn't a bad thing. It's kind of like a nice, like plethora of riches, I think, for NBA fans. The thing about like Jokic, why I like him the most for MVP is because he's like the one who kind of cares the least and probably wants it the least. You know what I mean? Like Embiid wants it, and he wants to kind of hang his hat on that accolade. And I'm not saying he's not deserving of it, but the appealing thing to me is that Jokic is just probably going to shrug if they like tell him, which is usually his reaction to kind of everything, right? He's just like, all right. Or like, I don't know. It's not really such a big deal to me. I love that. He's like the most like demure star who like doesn't really, you know, he doesn't really care about, I think, his stardom.
Right.
That's a big personal bias for me. I guess that's why I want him to win.
I am kind of I don't know if I feel this way about people in real life, but when I'm watching people, I love a try hard. Like I feel totally opposite. I love a try hard. I love someone who wants something so bad and they can't hide it. They can't be cool about it at all. It's really annoying, but there's just something about that I find very charming. It's like RuPaul's Drag Race has this all the time. Like there's always that every season, there's always at least 1 or 2 tryhards, and they just can't shake how much they want to win. And I love it. I find it so entertaining. But I do think between the two, I like Jokic more, but it's hard for me to decipher that between my own personal anti-76ers bias. You know what I mean? Like to me, the 76ers are just such villains. And I don't think Embiid personally is a villain, but as a team, they're such villains that it's hard for me to like want him to get it. Because I mean, the team record is almost identical. I don't have their personal stats in front of me because I'm not as professional as you, Katie. But
I don't have them in front of me either.
I should have. As I'm talking, I'm like, why didn't I do that, Cathryn?
It's okay.
Anyway, but I just feel like, I don't know, what I was thinking to myself, I look at the Nuggets and I think what Jokic is doing is almost even more impressive because of the lack of supporting cast around him. And that's kind of shady on my part. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's no Jamal Murray, there's no Michael Porter Jr. And it's just, but despite all of that, they're still really winning games. And I guess you could say the same for Embiid. Like, there's the Ben Simmons saga, blah, blah, blah. But I also feel like Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid were a part of throwing him under the bus that created that whole thing. They didn't want him. Embiid came out and was like, yo, he's still our brother. We all know that was just propaganda. And I don't know. Like, I just feel like I don't like it. Not that I'm like a Ben Simmons, like, rooting for him necessarily, but I just don't like the way all of that was handled. And it's just harder for me to root for him. And then they got James Harden.
Yeah. That's kind of what like draws me away from it, is like, in the end, I think Embiid and mostly Daryl Morey like got everything they wanted, right? Like, in getting James Harden. But to your point, like, earlier in the season, Embiid did, like, he was playing there was a fire kind of lit under him. He was like playing in a completely different style than I think he had in previous seasons. It seemed like he'd really just committed, like, all right, like, if I have to go it alone, that's fine. I'll like expand my role as needed. But the Jokic thing, I think, stands out more to me just because, like, he has been without Jamal Murray for so long, and it's not, and it's in a case of injury. Because I would say, just with the way that 76ers team was structured with Ben Simmons, it wasn't really like the two of them ever relied on each other anyway. Like, they were always kind of in conflict in terms of like what their roles were or were supposed to be on the floor. Whereas like Jokic and Murray, they play so well together, and like that team was kind of crafted around them, that roster. So I think that Jokic has kind of like stepped up and into that role of just like taking on a lot more. And to a degree, I think the leadership of that team, that's a bit more impressive to me. And to my earlier point, the fact that he's just kind of like, it's almost like he's just like, well, what else was I supposed to do? Which I respect.
That's true. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but there's a part of me that feels like the rest of the league, people who vote in this, are not going to want to reward the 76ers. I think, for me personally, I'm such a anti-tanking person, and there might be enough people who are also on that bandwagon, so to speak, that it's hard to reward it. Like, it's one thing if they win games and they win a championship, then it's like, whatever, it is what it is, right? But to reward it, I don't know.
It's just almost like, but to me, a counter to that is, if you reward it, will they finally shut up about it? I think no. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like giving the kid, like, if you give a petulant child the thing that they want and are kind of throwing a temper tantrum about, I don't know that it's actually going to help, or if it will just embolden them.
You know what? It's a good point. I don't know. It could swing either way. I think, and if anyone is listening who's a 76ers fan, feel free to counter my point. But wow, what a terrible fan base. Yeah. What a terrible fan base. I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I was talking a bit about this last week. People spending $4,000 to boo Ben Simmons, and he's not even playing. And then when I'm watching it, I'm like, you're not even booing him that hard?
Yeah, they were kind of shy.
Yeah, I was
like kind of shy boo.
You spent all this money to go there to boo this man, and it's so mediocre.
The thing that, like, why I can't, like, I don't mind the boos, like, get it out of your system, fair. But the thing with that whole situation and like saga really now is like, everybody got what they wanted. You know, like it wasn't really like maybe it took a little while, but like the Sixers certainly didn't suffer. Like they're having a great season. You know, like
I
things got
completely agree.
drawn out, but like in the end, Morey got his guy. Like James Harden theoretically has what he wants for, well, remains to be seen, but usually it lasts about like a season and a half. Like his happiness. We'll see if there's more longevity here. Embiid got what he wanted, but Simmons got out, thank God. Like I feel like it ended, for how like tumultuous it was to start, it ended in the best case scenario and everybody got what they wanted. So I'm a little bit like, you know, you kind of get to boo once, but then you got to drop it.
Right.
But I don't think they will.
No, I don't think they will either. And I don't know if it's just like, I don't know if this is just like my relationship with money, but for me, it's like to spend that much money.
I know.
Just to boo him is just, it's so wild to me. Like, even like, okay, I got an email from Sephora, as I do multiple times a day, as do many people.
Yes.
And there was like an email like, enter a competition for a getaway worth $50,000. And I was like, I don't think I could enjoy a vacation that costs that much.
Even if Sephora was paying for it?
No, because I'd be like, this what a waste. 50 grand, 50 grand, like spending 50 grand in like a week.
Yeah,
I can't do
it's
that.
Sephora's money. You know they're good for it. You
I know Sephora. Oh, I know Sephora.
Every time you go into a Sephora or you place an order online, you're like, I just need this one thing. It's not what you end up getting.
You know, like Sephora's like a cult, and at this point, maybe they owe me.
Yeah, they do owe you. Look at it like that.
I gotta look at it like that, because for me, I'm just like, wow. I mean, everybody's gonna listen to this and be like, wow, Cathryn's really poor. No, I'm okay, but I just mean, it's like,
just your relationship to money. I think about it the same way. I wouldn't pay $4,000. Paying $4,000 to boo someone is different than letting Sephora send you on vacation.
Thank you. I needed that. I needed that little therapy. I'm glad we worked it out.
So enter that contest.
Yeah, clearly I opened that email before we started recording, and I was just like, oh God, just giving me anxiety.
I will say Sephora, the last thing about Sephora, I'll say, they sent me a piece of physical mail yesterday. First I'd ever gotten from them. And they were like, hot deals inside for you. Like, I guess I'll reveal my status. I'm a Rouge member.
Oh, big time. I'm a VIB.
Okay. I don't know how I got up to Rouge. I think it was just probably in the days of CERB and the deep pandemic.
Yes. That's more than fair.
Yeah. But it was like, here's a deal. Hot deals. La Mer. Like, I don't use La Mer products. Everyone who doesn't know, they're very expensive. But the hot deal was, instead of $400, it was $380. I was like, this isn't a hot deal to me. So it's in the same vein as like the paying $4,000 for a ticket. It's not worthwhile.
Yes, 1,000%. Also, La Mer, I saw on Instagram. Apparently, all the ingredients, or at least I just saw this on Instagram. Okay, so don't quote me. Like do your research. Every ingredient was the exact same as in Nivea, listed in the same order.
Really?
And we're talking $400, $500 creams here.
Gonna look into that.
Yeah,
gonna look into that,
because a lot of these companies are owned by L'Oreal, and it's a whole thing.
Scam market.
We could do a whole hour just on that.
Yeah. I bet Embiid uses La Mer.
You think?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think Jokic uses anything.
I don't think Jokic uses anything at all. I don't. He probably dry shaves, like when he shaves.
Oh my God. Which face cream belongs to which NBA star is like, that's an off season.
Yeah, we should do that.
I would love that so much. Who is the Neutrogena hydrogel of the NBA?
Who's like the Neutrogena girl, the Jennifer Garner, like constantly getting the Neutrogena dollars.
Oh my God.
And who's that's like La Prairie, or who's also doing K Beauty. I want to know who has a K Beauty skincare routine.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, love this. Future episode, future deep August. episode of this podcast.
It's good. Really tease it now. Give people something to look forward to.
I love it. When Casey Bannerman was on a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what sandwich would go with what coach, NBA coach. So I'm hoping we get to do a sandwiches coaches episode.
Yeah.
So if we're doing that, we can do face creams and players.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is the ridiculous I live for. Okay. We have one more topic before we get into Raptors. Looking at the bracket as it stands today on Thursday, March 17th, which as we know, it will not change by tomorrow because only the Pistons and Magic are playing tonight. Katie, looking at this, outside of the Raptors, who are you looking forward to the most?
In the playoffs?
Yes.
I'm gonna even do bad podcasting and pull up the bracket.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. I think I'm pretty excited to see the Heat and the Bulls.
Oh, yeah.
I think just like Lowry and DeRozan.
Yes.
That's a given.
Yes.
I feel pretty sad for the Cavs. Just like the injuries that they've had, and like Jared Allen being out. I am vehemently against Jared Allen rushing back and opting not to do surgery because he wants to come
happening?
Back. Yeah, because he wants to come back and play. And to me,
shit.
I feel like yes, they're a very exciting team. It's super cool what they've been doing this season, but it's not like this has to be the window, like they could. I feel like he should get the surgery. Pascal Siakam did the same thing. I mean, granted, the Raptors season last season was much different than the Cavs season this season, but if you want to talk about just like career longevity, and I think that Cavs group is like they could do very well next season too. Like this doesn't just have to be the window.
They're a young team.
Exactly. So I really don't like that. So I guess that's opposite. That does not excite me.
Fair.
I'm excited to see the Grizzlies, who've kind of just like furiously, like climbed up the West and see how far they can get into the postseason. They are still a really young team. That kind of stuff is always exciting to me. I think, the Hawks had a bit like of this last season where it's like a young team where they don't necessarily know how far they should get, but that can kind of play in their favor because they're playing really without expectation, and like the Suns, because man, I really just want Chris Paul to win a ring. Like I really want him to win a championship. And I think it's very wild. And I wrote about this recently, but just like the Suns are the best team in the NBA and nobody talks about them because they're just like stable and like very like work a day. There's no drama, like they're just, but people aren't interested in that.
It's true. Well, I think there's been so much drama with so many other teams that it has kind of taken the spotlight away from them. I mean, even like the Heat have been number one in the East for a good chunk of the season. And I don't feel like people talk about them a lot either. I just think there's just been a lot of distractions this year. But I agree. I'm really excited to see the Grizzlies. I think my little quote unquote hot take, it's not that hot, but I think the Eastern Conference play-in is going to be so much more exciting and so much more significant than the West. Like looking at the East, obviously the Raptors are in that mix currently, although that could change. Between the Raptors and the Cavs, and we'll get into that shortly. You have the Nets, the Hornets, and the Hawks. And I feel like any of those teams are really capable of pulling off an upset. Whereas when you look at the West, and it's the Timberwolves, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Pelicans, I would be extremely shocked if the Pelicans or Lakers came out of the play-in. Like extremely shocked. Like I feel like the Timberwolves and the Clippers are just significantly more solid. and I would be really surprised if they didn't win. And also too, as far as playoff series, I think the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves would be such a fun first round
It
playoff
would.
series.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
would.
like obviously I don't see the Timberwolves coming out of that, but man, that would just be really, really fun to see, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's like those kinds of matchups that are really exciting to me because again, this is I guess a little bit similar to the last couple seasons, but seeing matchups that we haven't like historically kind of seen and the ones like you get really familiar with in the playoffs, like those have all been shaken up. I'd say, definitely more in the East, but in the West too. So I think that's probably what like actually excites me most, at least like with the postseason, is just how explosive and like there could be some upsets. It's not like March Madness style, but like, there could be some upsets.
Yeah, I
Some
mean,
brackets
I
could
still
get
think
busted.
the league is generally pretty wide open.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree.
so
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely there could be some upsets. With that, let's move on to our Raptors Homer moment. So the Raptors are on a 5-game win streak, which has been so exciting and completely puts me in an emotionally different place than I was last week recording this. Pretty sure I said last week's episode, I was like, I don't see the Raptors getting out of the play-in. I was contemplating losing against the Brooklyn Nets and then winning against Charlotte or the Hawks and then facing Kyle Lowry in the Miami Heat in the first round and dreading it oh so deeply.
Mhm.
This week I'm looking at the Raptors and thinking, "Oh, we could get out. We could get out of the play-in and be the 6th seed and then face what would currently be the Sixers, although that could change because those numbers are pretty close right now in the first round. Anything that does not involve facing Kyle Lowry in the first round of the playoffs is very appealing to me. How do you feel about the Raptors right now, and do you think they can escape the play-in?
I think so. I mean, they've definitely got some. I mean, we talked a little bit about Cleveland, but they've got some unfortunate factors like that on their side, right? Like that's just sort of the reality, I think, of this time of year in the NBA. We touched on that earlier too. But yeah, what a difference a week makes. I think
Yeah.
I still stand by the fact that like this is a developmental year, but definitely last week I was leaning like much harder on that. It's like a
Yes.
justifier. Like don't just like it's a developmental year. Like don't anybody get too hung up on these losses. Now, like the West Coast road trips, I feel like were these kind of haunting, very scarring experiences historically. And now it's just like a walk in the park, breezy, easy breezy, a lot of fun. So I think it bodes pretty well. I'm with you. Like, I think the only matchup I do not want to see in the first round, or frankly, at all in the playoffs, is against a Kyle Lowry Heat team. Anyone else, I'm not that. I feel like the Raptors measure up to pretty well. You know what I mean? Like we talked, like the Grizzlies would be tough. They're like an energetic, super rangy, really like fast and explosive team. But I think again, they're young. They can be, disrupted. I think the Raptors have some like guys that would be really good matched up against them. The Sixers, same thing. I think the Raptors do continue to be a little bit of a bane of the Sixers' existence. Like for a lot of teams in the East. I think like I don't know how deep into the playoffs, like the imaginary playoffs we want to get, but like I don't know. There's still something like if it worked out to be like not in the if there worked out to be some matchup when it was like the Raptors and the Celtics, that would still bug me a little bit. I don't know if that's just like leftover fear, from the bubble.
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't think the Raptors could be considered a favorite.
Yes.
In any first round matchup against any of these teams. I'm not as much of a homer that I could say they would be a favorite, but I would be emotionally in a better place if we don't have to face the Heat in the first round.
Yeah.
I also do not want to face. I mean, Doris Burke went on a very nice, lovely tangent about how the Brooklyn Nets don't want to see the Toronto Raptors in a play-in. And I love Doris Burke, but I'm sitting here like I don't want to see the Brooklyn Nets in a play-in either. You know what I mean? I do think, with the way mandates are currently being lifted, it seems like Kyrie would likely be able to play. I'm not 100% on that, but it seems more and more likely that he would be able to play. So I just think, like, yes, we would have another chance at it, but I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with Brooklyn. Am I crazy?
No, like, I don't want to deal with Kevin Durant ever. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, the mandates thing is a good point, because honestly, like, who knows how, like, if that will even last in terms of, like, if that will be a Raptors advantage by the time the play-in rolls around. I have no idea. What a weird thing to even be, like, talking about and considering, but that's the reality that we're in. So yeah, I like that Doris said that, but part of me feels like she was maybe just like amping.
I think Doris loves Nick Nurse just as much as I do, maybe more. I think that's quite possible. Yeah, I do think, like, the Raptors have earned enough of a reputation that it's like, yeah, you don't necessarily want to face us in a play-in. And I think that's really good for our team and for their confidence. But if we can get out of the play-in, obviously, that would be incredible. They've already overachieved for me this season.
Yeah,
if I'm being completely honest, I thought we would be in the lower bracket of this play-in going into the season. So they have already surpassed my expectations. I'm already really, like, proud of this team. I'm not adjusting my expectations because they've exceeded them, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. Like, I think, like, Scottie has obviously shown up and shown out, and to me, I'm like, yes, but he is still a rookie. He still needs to learn the lessons of being in tight games, closing out games, being in a playoff environment. And I feel like we need to give our team the opportunity to go through that. So I'm not rushing anybody along, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that goes along with, like, again, I really do think, like, this is a developmental year. That's why part of it feels so nice to me, is because there's really no pressure. And every good thing has felt like a bonus, like, has felt like a really happy bonus. And I think for you, I understand for, like, a player like Scottie, Solano, I think Precious Achua to a degree, like, you want to give these guys some playoff experience, like postseason experience, if you can, but be realistic, right? About, like, how far they should go and why, like, because again, like, the idea for this season is to kind of lock things in. And I think, like, get a better sense of what needs to be tweaked and adjusted over the summer, and then come back next season. And the fact that the team is already looking pretty complete and good, there's things you want to add here and there, and you want, like, guys to develop and work on in their, like, individual off seasons. But I think they're way ahead of schedule, right? For, like you said it, like, to where the expectation was in terms of where you thought the Raptors would end up, like, be at this point in the regular season. I'm with you. Like, I did not think they would be, like, burning up a very hard West Coast road trip, but they are. They're looking good. They look happy, which I think is, like, an important thing. They're relatively healthy, touch wood, like, after a lot of, ups and downs this season. I think they're in great shape. So I'm very, like, this is a good thing, like, you don't need to, like, push it unnecessarily. I know we want to win. That is what Masai said. And, like, yeah, they want to win games, but, like, playing feels good. Playing feels like a good target. And then like, recalibrate,
I agree. Pascalifornia became a thing this week. Extremely delightful. Truly all the feels. I love it so much. It's really what feels like a retaliation to the LeBronto years. I phrase this question as, are you still traumatized? I know you're not, but I don't know if you can speak a bit about what Pascalifornia has meant to you over these last few days.
I mean, again, I think it's good. I think it's like more of a testament to like where the team is as a whole. And also, I think where Pascal has kind of gotten to as an individual player, as a leader. I think more importantly, like, not, I mean, LeBron's not necessarily, actually, no, LeBron James is still in a position to like fluster and make things difficult. The Lakers aren't. So, like, the hole that he's part of is not as threatening or like scary as those Cavs teams were by any stretch. LeBron can still be. So I'm not traumatized, but I also think that's like part of a player like Pascal's growth, right? Where like you want him to get to a point where he isn't either. And like he grows kind of past it. You can like recognize like, yeah, those years really sucked. But like, look what I've kind of grown into out of it. So it does feel like a nice like deliverance for him, especially this season. It's like a season where he seems like he's definitely more at ease. He's playing a pretty joyful game, I'd say. I think he's in a good place as a leader for like still a really relatively young team when you look at all the new guys. I think it's good, man. And like he always, like Nick Nurse said that, like, we like the sun. We know what it's like in Toronto in March after like a winter.
True.
They like the sun. They're happy to be out there.
Yeah, I can't even blame them, honestly. Yeah, like the return of Pascal Siakam has been a deeply, deeply underrated storyline this year. Not by Raptors fans, but by the NBA at large. It's been incredible to watch. It's been deeply satisfying after the bubble and then last year's season, which I really truly want to block out of my memory forever. To now have pro Pascal propaganda like Pascalifornia is just so delightful. I truly, truly love it. And we mentioned it a bit earlier, but the LeBron James temper tantrum against the Raptors felt a little personal, in my opinion. I think he is used to dominating the Raptors. He's used to the Raptors always being there and him shutting them down. I don't think LeBron James can personally handle a blowout by the Raptors.
Potentially. I mean, I think a lot of it is also like he's not having a great season.
No, of course not. I mean, there's a lot built up to that moment, but I'm like, I think this is especially hard for him.
There's some pent up tension, but you're right. Like maybe he thought like, all right, this team's been trash, but like at least we can get a win out, on the Raptors. I think to me, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's funny because there's like something that's a bummer about it. Yes. I think especially in that game when he like tried to murder Scotty Barnes with a basketball. It's like, you gotta.
Yeah, that was really rough.
I know what he was trying to do theoretically, but also like if you're trying to inbound it off of someone, you also had like 3 of your own teammates that were wide open that you could have more easily passed it to, than like turned your body like much farther than you had to, look down, see where Scotty Barnes was, angle the ball down with like such,
force. Yeah.
Force. Poor Scotty Barnes, man. Like poor Scotty Barnes to like be a rookie in that situation. And like, I think he even said, he's like, LeBron's been in the league since I was like born. Like to be playing with someone like against someone like LeBron in the first year, of like your NBA career, and like to have something like that happen, and you can't really react to it, right? You got to kind of walk it off a little bit. So I don't think that I don't really like to see that side of maybe LeBron's like meltdowns and kind of outbursts, and the fact that he wasn't available, I think, for media afterward. Didn't really like that either. No,
Oh my
because I wish
God.
I wanted somebody to ask him about that specifically. I know like guys are tough on rookies, but that felt
That's why we need you in there, Katie. We need you in there asking him those questions.
that just felt like very poignant and like targeted. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I wonder. I don't necessarily see that. I think when he went to the Lakers, LeBron thought he would stay there. Like that would be the kind of natural
That would
end to
be
his
the end,
career.
yeah.
Yeah, and like a very winning end. I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't know where he would go, but I don't think
I
he's
mean,
so hung up on staying.
and he hinted as such during the All-Star
Yes.
weekend. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole thing. We could go on and on about the Lakers for yet another hour after we talk about face creams. But yeah, it was. I actually went to. I did not stay up for the game on one of those. Like I went to bed.
I did too,
People. So
man.
I didn't see.
I
I
can't
didn't
stay
see
up.
the elbow on Pascal until the next day.
Mhm.
And that was another one. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. That's why I'm like, you know what? This is like a little extra personal for him that it's against the Raptors, in
Yes.
my humble opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's rough and that was not fun to watch if you're a LeBron fan. Let's move on, Katie, to our Nick Nurse Hottie highlight of the week, which is a somewhat loved and somewhat loathed segment at times. Nick Nurse hosted a coaching summit this past Sunday.
Mhm.
It was free. It was online. It was a few hours. Katie, I have a confession to make. I fell asleep. It was
Like during?
and I missed it.
Oh, I thought
So
you were
it was like
watching and you fell asleep.
I was watching it
Oh.
because it started at like 9 in the morning and it was like or like 9:30 or something. I think they started late. And then it was like daylight saving, so I'd already like lost that hour.
Yeah, it's rough.
And it was like all the assistants, God bless them, talking. You know, you're all fun, you're all great, just not the star of the show for me. And I fully fell asleep. I don't think I heard a single word Nick Nurse had to say. Isn't that brutal?
Man. I mean,
I'm sure he said a lot of great stuff.
Daylight savings messing with everybody, so I feel you. Yeah, who knows what he said? I guess you'll never know until next coaching. He does those every year, doesn't he?
He does,
Yeah.
but it used to be more like 4 coaches,
Mhm.
and he used to be more like specific to that, and now he's kind of opened it up for like the general public, so it's like probably not as like hard coaching advice as it would have been in the past.
Right.
Because you used to have to like be a coach to go, and
Yeah.
like you have like a I don't know, some sort of like a registration thing. But yeah, I missed it.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Don't beat yourself up about it though. I'm sure it's online somewhere too if you really want to rewatch it.
You know what? I have not looked it
parts.
up. Somebody may have recorded it.
100% somebody did.
Yeah. But anyway, at least it was nice that he did it. They were on the road and they did it anyway, and that's nice.
I didn't know if you were going to ask me for a Nick Nurse moment, so I did actually think of one this time.
Oh, please tell me.
I really liked it when he called out the Clippers media. He was like, what did he say? Something like, have you guys picked who you're going to try and steal? Like in the off season, and then he was
said
like,
that?
please stop doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
Katie,
I thought that was pretty sassy.
that is so sassy.
And that's
oh my God.
I feel the same way.
I also feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Except they traded Serge.
Yeah, they did. But they got Norman.
But they have Norm now.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are obsessed with our team.
They're obsessed.
Wow, I love that he said that.
Mm-hmm.
That is quite sad. I guess we win 5 games in a row. You're feeling
you're feeling sassy.
Extra cocky, I guess. Well, Katie, that has been our episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find you on the internets?
All over. So I guess the easiest place to find the work that I do, you can follow me on Twitter at whatevs, WTEVS, or as you mentioned earlier, you can read Basketball Feelings. You can listen to the Basketball Feelings podcast, and that's at basketballfeelings.com.
Thank you so much. And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at itsme_Cathryn, spelled Cathryn. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.